Hello, my name is Doug Leisure, and today I wanted to create this video to talk about the parameters that you use in my donation software to adjust how the software works, allowing you to customize it to work the way you need to. This is the parameters tab. Again, when we're talking about the tabs, we're talking about the things you select down here at the bottom. You come over to the parameters tab, and this is where we adjust them. And this is one of the first things you do need to set up when you're installing the software. In my videos on installation for the PC and the one for the Mac, I highlight some of the most important ones that need to be set up. Some of the other ones are kind of optional. But in this video, I wanted to go ahead and go over all of the parameters. And yes, there are a lot of them, almost 100 parameters. That's what gives you a lot of flexibility to adjust how the software works. I do want to say that in the documentation, my user guide, I do have a very lengthy section on the parameters, and they're all listed here with descriptions about how they work, and in a lot of cases extra information, not just a description, but examples. So we talk about how the parameters come in two varieties. One would be where you can just simply type in some words or numbers. So like the church name, right? If our church is the First Baptist Church, then we would just simply type that in, that parameter. Okay, and down here where we're entering a value, a number, we just type that in. In other cases, we have a drop-down list, and if we look at the one where you're picking a month in which the fiscal year begins, clicking the little drop-down, the little arrow here, we get a list of months. So a variety of things, and hopefully it's kind of clear as you go through. But one of the most critical things for you to do, in fact, I say in the documentation, this should be the first thing you do, is to select the language. So yeah, the software does ship with English and Spanish. I have other translations available, but that's what it ships with. And so if you wanted to use the software in Spanish, then that's actually the first thing you'd want to do, is to pick the Spanish language, because when you do that, everything in the software changes. The description, the parameter descriptions here, as well as the drop downs. So if I go back to selecting the beginning month of the fiscal year on the drop down, now I'm seeing a list of months in Spanish. So that's why you want to do this first. So as you're doing your parameters, the ones with the drop down will display the information in the language you've selected. So do that first. Okay, let me throw it back to English so we can continue on down through here. Okay. The other thing that would be important to note here, let me just go back to the documentation again real quickly. So as you scroll down through the section on parameters, you'll get to the part where we give you the full name of each parameter and then a description and explanation of how that works. In some cases, we need a lot more explanation for that particular parameter. And fiscal years are one of the things that would be a pretty good example of that. Now, the good news is that most churches in the US at least do not work on a fiscal year basis. They work on a calendar year, January through December. So for most people, this is not an issue. However, for the ones that the nonprofits, and there are some churches that are reporting on a fiscal year basis. Now they'll run their year-end receipts on a calendar basis, but they'll want to report their donations on a fiscal basis. So there's a lot of detail here. And I did actually create a totally separate video on setting up fiscal years, and in the documentation there's a link to that video. So if you're one of the organizations or churches that needs that, I would suggest you look at the video, as well as reading through the lengthy examples and information on fiscal years. So pretty important to take a look at that. We also have an example for New Zealand. It's my understanding, working with some churches there, that the entire country runs on a fiscal year basis. So it's important for them to be able to do their receipts as well as their reporting on a fiscal year. So that should be a good explanation of what's in the user guide to help you out. Let's go ahead and walk our way down through some of these, or actually all of the parameters. Okay, so the first one is the calendar year will display amounts for which year. Another way to think of that, if you have any kind of a financial background, this will make sense for you too, and that is it's really more of the reporting year. So on our annual tab, we're going to have data in here for multiple years. It's going to continue year after year after year, and so the parameter is not determining what year of data or of donations we're receiving. We can receive it and enter it at any point in time. This is really just simply telling the software, when you're doing a receipt or a report, what year of data am I pulling for that receipt or that report. So if we look over here at the report, we are pulling data from the annual tab and displaying it here for year 2024, because that's what the parameter is set to. And if I just simply switch it to year 2025, now I'm reporting on year 2025. So it's really just that simple. The next thing would be the fiscal year stuff. So even if your organization does report on a fiscal year basis, you still will probably, very, very likely in the United States, be doing your receipts on a calendar year. So you could possibly have these set up on 2 different years. So if you're doing fiscal years, what year of data am I displaying? What's the reporting fiscal year? And then this controls defining, these next 2 are just simply for defining how the fiscal year works, when it begins, when it ends, and what do you call the fiscal year. And again, go if you have to do fiscal years, I'm not going to describe all of it here. Go to the other video, and let's go through that in that other video. But do note that for each of the other sections of parameters, one of the things we talk about is, on the receipt, am I displaying the receipt in a calendar year or a fiscal year? So we do that for the receipts, we do that for the reports, we do that as well for expenses and balances. So if you are using a fiscal year, you still have to decide, am I doing it for receipts or for reports or for expenses or for all 3, and they can each have a different answer, trying to again give you a lot of flexibility to meet your needs. Okay, so for next one, the date format. So in the United States, we typically use the month, day, year, and that's the default here, but we also give you the option, if you're not in the US, to set up what I think is the more standard international view, which is year, month, day. So you can switch that. All right, the next one, using in-kind donations. And in-kind donations, that's just another way of what some people have termed non-cash donations. So I'm a church that runs a soup kitchen, and we have people bringing us food, loaves of bread, cans of soup, and we want to include that as part of their receipt. So we switch this in-kind donation from no to yes. Okay, and if I come over here, um, the software is already set up and defined to. Sorry, I should have not. Let's not switch that quite yet. Leave it at no. On the entry tab, we're already set up to allow you to enter special donations, right? In addition to our standard categories and or funds, some people call it, we always have the option for special donations. Okay, but we want to now add the capability for someone to do a special donation that's not cash, that is cans of soup, and to record that and include it on their receipt. And so we set the do you want to use in-kind donations, yes or no? We set that to yes. And here's the other small thing about the parameters. Any of the items highlighted in this pinkish color, whenever you modify and change one of those, you need to come up to the donation software menu and select the one that says adjust tabs from parameters. Okay, so most of the parameters do not need you to do this. When you make a change, like going from one year to another, boom, it just immediately works. Right there, immediately we're displaying 2024 data on the report. But some of these require that I run back through and basically a lot of times we're touching every one of the tabs and making adjustments to the tabs. And so I've color coded those ones in this pinkish color. So when you make a change to one of these, you need to run this adjust tabs, and it goes back through and makes the changes. And now on our entry tab, in addition to our special offering, we have the in-kind donations. So here you can put in a dollar amount, whatever the value is of the items that were donated, and the name. So it could be as simple as $25 and it was cans of soup, right? That kind of an idea. So that's the concept. So that in two parts. One is that's what the in-kind donation is doing for us, and you can decide whether or not you want to include that on your entry tab and in your reports and receipts or not. And also an explanation of these pinkish colored things, how anytime you modify them, then you'll need to run the adjust tabs from parameters, that menu item. Okay, next one, donations only or donations and expenses. Let's just set that back to no. Okay, so the software was initially created to only record donations and make receipts for people at the end of the year so they can track their donations. That was the initial thing more than 10 years ago when I designed it. And then I was asked to add something that would allow some of the churches to track their expenses and produce a report that would show the income versus the expense. And so about 6 or 7 years ago, I added that functionality and I've continued to enhance that. And so now you get your choice of doing the donations only or doing both donations and expenses, being able to track your donations, being able to track your expenses, and produce an income versus expense report. So you do need to make that decision. And again, if you make that change, it's one of the pink ones. You just run adjust tabs from parameters, and now the tabs related to expenses and balances and reporting, those are hidden. They're not deleted. They're just hidden. Okay, and likewise within the software, the code that we run through when you use the different menu items here, they recognize that you're not doing anything with with the expenses, and they ignore that part of the code. So okay, so that's the donations only, or donations and expenses. Let's go ahead and set it back here. It'll just help out as we walk our way down through the other parameters. Okay, next one. Do you want to use the printer dialog box when you're printing? This is mostly helpful, or I should say really helpful for Mac users, but it can be advantageous for us PC users as well. So if I set this to yes, that means whatever I print, let's go ahead and just say we're going to print a monthly report. We get the question then, do you want to open the printer dialog box when you're printing the report? If we say yes, rather than dumping the report straight to the printer, we get the dialog box popping up here. And one of the things we can do here is we can change the number of pages we want, the number of copies over here. We can change the properties. We can choose different printers. We also have the option to preview, and that's probably in the PC world what I use this for most often, is to take a look at what the report would look like. Do I need to switch it to landscape? Is it being shrunk too much, and to the point I can no longer read it? But it allows me to look at that in a preview before printing it to the paper and wasting paper. So let me just close that down. And that's in the Macintosh world. They have many more options in the printer dialog box, and that was one of the reasons I was asked to include that. But it's also again helpful even in the PC world, so we can preview things without wasting paper. All right, the next ones are just simply the name of your church and the church address. Okay, that one's pretty self-explanatory, I think. And again, this is one where you just type it. The other ones are the drop downs, but this one you just type. Okay, let's get down to the next part. And so I do want to say that the parameters are grouped together according to their functionality. So on the top we have kind of more of the high level or the global type parameters, and then we get down to the ones related to donation entry. So that's all things related to what we do in the entry tab when we are receiving a donation. Do you want to print the detail, yes or no? And so on the entry tab, as you're doing your donation entries, so let's say it's for 115.25, and donor number 2 gives us $100 in cash, and she wants 50 here and 50 there. And then you go on and you fill out the rest. Okay, so this is the detail. All of this information here on the top is the detail. If you want to print this, most people do, but you would just set that parameter to yes. The next part will be the next question you'll see here in a moment is related to the summary. So the donation summary, and that's the part down here at the bottom, and this is where we fill in. Let's see, so the $100 was made up of 2 5s, 2 5s, 110, and 4 20s. And if you have checks, you'd fill the amounts in down there. But it's this part down here that is called the summary, and that's what gives us the this is actually our bank deposit information, cash and checks, as well as our totals by the category. So that's the summary part. Okay, let's go on with the parameters. Okay, so yes or no, do you want to print the detail? Down here, donation summary, print that, yes or no. Okay, so those are the two things we talked about. On the detail part, If you do want to print it, the other question is how many copies do you want? I know at our church we actually do 2 copies so that it goes to 2 different people. Next part, how number of donation detail pages, and what that is referring to is just simply when you print the detail, okay, the software is set up so that it will take this printout and it will force it to fit on one piece of paper, because that parameter is set to 1, meaning force it onto one page. Okay, so and that's, again, we're using the print preview is actually a really good thing, so we can see what it looks like depending on how many donation categories you have and how much this information you're displaying. You very well might need to do this landscape. As soon as you switch it to landscape, now I can't fit as many rows on a piece of paper, so shrinking it in Excel might have to shrink it considerably to get it to fit on that one piece of paper, and therefore it's going to be hard to read. So you can just simply come back here and switch this to 2 pages, telling Excel that as the number of rows grow, go ahead and let it flow onto 2 different pages rather than trying to shrink it down to fit on a single page. So this is the idea of that, how many, the number of pages you want Excel to force it onto. So by default it will be 1, but you can switch that to 2, or again, if you have lots more information, you can tell it 3 or 4. Okay, let's go on. The next part is I mentioned about switching it from portrait to landscape, because the number of columns needs to go landscape so that it will fit better. And so this is where you switch that detail printout from portrait to landscape. Hide the names when you're printing the donation details. So you'll saw when we filled in donor number 2 that Natalie's name appeared here. Definitely a very good thing and very necessary thing when we're doing our donations as we're recording them, to make sure that when we enter the donor number, we can look over here and say, yeah, we got the right number, so that we're giving credit to Natalie for her donations and not incorrectly giving it to somebody else. So it's really important during the entry. But during the printing of the donation detail, you do have the option to just simply hide these, and all it's going to do is basically just blank out temporarily the names here. So they'll just disappear during the printout and then come back again. So that's an option for you. Okay, next question, print the donation summary. We talked about that already, but you do also have the option here to say how many copies of the summary do you want. So if you need to pass it out to more than one person, you could just do it during the printing rather than printing one and throwing it on your copying machine to make a second copy. You can just print 2. All right, now we get down to the entry rows to insert. Okay, and these might actually be I might have these in a slightly different order. I don't think on the version I sent you, I believe we have the rows first, followed by the number of rows to insert. Let's talk about that briefly. So the first one is by default, when you open it up and you're ready to do your donations, how many rows do we have in here for your weekly entry? So by default, you'll have 20 rows. And if you know that on a regular basis, you need 35 rows, because that's how many envelopes and donations you get, well, then you can switch that so that the default is 35. Every time you open this up, there will be 35 in there waiting for you to fill in. The second question is, and when I run out on any given week, and I come up here and I say insert entry rows, that's what will come down here and at the bottom between these two rows, it will insert additional blank rows for you, so you can do more donations. How many are going to be inserted when I use that option? And that's what this other parameter here is. So by default, you'll have 20 rows for you to do your entry, and you'll get 10 additional ones when you click the menu item to insert more entry rows. In a similar way, down at the bottom we have this part where we are telling the software the value of each of our checks. So now this is not correct, because it'd be not 500. Sorry, I put it in the wrong column in the check amount. So and this is the wrong way to do it, because we'd have $500 in total across multiple checks. But when we're filling in down here, we're filling in the amount of each check. The amounts, not the check numbers, the amounts. But we do this to basically re-enter each of the checks down here, and we use that as a balance, a check back to the total amount that we entered in the check column. And this is a way to validate that we entered things correctly. So so it's an important thing to be able to do that. But the parameters are simply referring to the question of how many of these rows do we have in here by default. When you're, for each week as you begin, how many rows are there already? And then when you click on insert check detail rows, it's going to add additional rows here. And how many of those additional rows do we insert when you start to run out? So just keep in mind, we use all four. Each row has the ability to hold 4 different check amounts. So it's 4 times 5, so it's actually 20 checks is what you get by default. And then again, you can insert additional ones when you start to run out. And according to the parameters, we will have 5 by default, and we will add 1 more row, so 4 more checks, if we start to run out and we click the option to insert check detail rows. Okay, let's move on to some other things that are pretty simple, and that is, and when you're done with your weekly donation or your donation, do we save a copy of that? And what we mean by that is just simply everything on this entry tab, we will save that to a separate Excel file, and that just basically kind of gives you a backup of the information by person, as well as the summary at the bottom for that particular donation. So that's the idea. Do you want to keep that little backup copy, yes or no? If you do, then the next thing to think about is what kind of a name do you want to give it. And so what we have here is just simply the prefix for that name, meaning we will save it as weekly giving record, followed by the date, year, month, day, followed by the time in military time. So we take all of that, push it all together, and make a file name for that backup copy. Now the other thing about that is, where do we put it? So by default, it will go into the same location as your master file. That's the one I send you, and you set up this one with all of the tabs in it. That's the master Excel file. By default, your weekly backup will go there, but you do have the option of defining a different folder for that location. And if you're going to do that, then you do want to be careful to make sure you give it a valid location. And what I mean by that is in the PC world, you will want to, let's see if I can, yeah, let's take a look at the documentation again. In the PC world, you will want to make sure you include your drive and the full path to that folder. Okay, so this is kind of what it would look like in the PC world. On the Macintosh, similar concept, but of course it's a little bit different. So you would end up setting up a folder path that would look something like this. So here's the my local drive, the users folder, my name, the documents folder, and then a subfolder under that called donation software. So this is what it would look like in the Mac world. Okay, and then you would just enter that here in this parameter. All right, a couple other things, and then we'll be done with the entry tab, and that is related to some of these initial columns. So interestingly, we found that yes, there are some churches that receive cash donations only, so they really didn't have any need and didn't want to see the check amount column on the entry tab. In a similar way, some churches receive cash and checks but don't do any online or electronic fund transfer type donations, so they wanted an option to hide that. And so that's what these parameters are for. And so that's just referring into do you want to hide this column? Do you want to hide that column? Okay, the other parameter that was there asked about do you want to use the column to override the donation date. So let's just talk about that one very briefly. So we talked about having a donation date of January 15 of 2025, and so then we can put in our donations, as I should have probably left that one there from before. That's okay. But what this column does for you, if you make that visible, is that you can for any particular donation entry, or actually for all of them if you want to, you can actually enter different dates than the one you specify up here at the top. So rather than there being one date that applies to all donations, each donation could actually have its own unique date. So let's say it came in on the 17th. Okay, now where you might find this most helpful would be a situation where you are a small nonprofit and you get maybe a dozen or a couple dozen donations throughout the entire month, right? So you're not like a church that every week is getting lots of donations, but rather you want to enter them maybe just one time at the end of the month, enter all donations for the month and record them at that point. And so that would be a great place to use this thing where you can go through and put unique dates on every transaction or every row, every record. The other place that it often makes a lot of sense is related to the online donations. What we find is sometimes churches are experimenting with the online donations, trying to get their congregation to use more of this, and at first, while they're getting started, you only get just a handful of donations through the online mechanism. And so that's where using the the individual dates and waiting till the end of the month to do all of that entry maybe at one time could make a lot of sense. That's a good place for it. And so that kind of a concept would make a lot of sense. So you can put them all in at one time, identifying whether they came from Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, Tithely. There's a variety of different ways to do that, or credit card. But just waiting to the end of the month and doing them all of the online donations at one time. That's another good use of this override column. All right, and that takes care of everything related to the entry tab. Let's go on to the parameters related to receipts. Okay, the first question when it comes to receipts is, what language do we want to display the receipt in? Kind of an interesting question, but I know there are quite a few churches in the U.S., but the churches themselves are not English speaking. And I'm thinking of some of the Spanish ones, the Korean one, the Japanese church, the Chinese church. So that's a time when perhaps you might want to use the software in Korean, but you still want to print your receipts in English so that your donors can actually take it to their tax preparer in English. So that's kind of the idea there. But you can you can use the software in one language, but choose a different language on the receipts. Okay, next one on the receipts that's pretty important is, am I going to print my receipts where the data flows on a calendar year, January through December, or a fiscal year as you've defined up above? So that, again, this is important in the U.S. where perhaps the organization reports on a fiscal year, October through the following September, but they need to produce their receipts for their donors on a calendar basis because that's what the IRS wants. All right, next one. How do we display the receipts? So by default, our receipts are going to look like this, where for each donor it's going to show us the months and then the total amounts donated in each month for the different categories. So it's monthly totals. So that's what the receipt would look like by default. However, we give you options over that. So you can display it monthly, you can display it weekly, where we have 52 up to 53 weeks, and we show the same amounts, but summarized at the weekly level. There's also an option to do both, the monthly at the top and then the weekly detail below. I'm not sure that there's many people that are actually using both of those, but that was an option that was requested, so we gave you that option. The other thing is to show the receipts in detail. Okay, and then there's one more choice, which is even more details, all the details available. So let's just talk about that. Actually, no, let me not talk about it. Let me show it to you. So I think the best thing we can do is, let's go ahead and make sure we are showing the printer dialog box. So we can do the preview. Yep, and we're going to adjust. That was one of the pinkish colored ones, right? So on the receipts are displayed. Yeah, so this is one of the pinkish ones. So we adjust the tabs, and that adjusts again how the software works now. And if we go ahead and print a receipt for, let's just do it for a single donor, and that would be like, let's choose Natalie. Yeah, Natalie Stevenson will do hers. Open the printer dialog box. Yes. And we will preview it. So this is what the receipt would look like for Natalie. So this is the detail receipt. So we have her, can I zoom up on that a little bit? There we go. So we have her information, name and address here. But then every time she donated, each record, each row of donation for her is written to the report. If she donated 2 times, there's only 2 rows in here. If she donated 50 times, then there will be 50 rows in here. So we have the date, we have the amounts of each of her donations, including the specials. It would include the in-kind if she did that, as well as the total. Now, if we let's switch back over to then all details and just take a quick look at that. So if we do all details, again, it's one of the pinkish ones. So we'll adjust the tabs and we'll go ahead and do it again. We'll print the receipt for Natalie. Take a look at the dialog box and preview it. Okay, so the difference is this is the same as the detail receipt, with the addition of that we also include that whether it was given as cash, checks, or EFT, as well as any of the information you put in this column, where you can put check numbers, you can put like the EFT type, Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, or any generic comments can go in details. The advantage to the detail receipt is that for the specials, it also includes the name of the special. If you do all details, then you can also show how they gave their money through cash, checks, or EFT. So those are the differences in those. All right, back to the parameters. We'll go ahead and just set that back to kind of the default monthly view on the receipts, and let's work our way through. Next question: are the receipts printed in black and white? I know that's kind of a funny way to say it. You probably would be happier if we asked whether or not you wanted it in color, thinking the black and white is the default. But sorry, for the receipts. So I have a video that I shows you how you can add your logos to the receipts, as well as the reports and other things. But some logos are created in color, and some of the churches have asked to have the option to print the receipt in color, since their logo is in color. So that's why you have the option. So if you do want to print if you have a color logo, then you can print them in color by just switching this from black and white yes to black and white no, and that'll be color. Okay, just as we talked about on the donation details, we have the question of, do you want it to be printed portrait or landscape? The other thing you need to think about when you're doing the receipts, is there a minimum amount that you want to use? So I have seen some churches set that $100, some set it to $200, and so therefore if your donor if you set it to $200 and your donor gives you a total of $175 through the year, don't bother printing a receipt for them. That's the idea. And so we have it set to a penny. So if they give a penny or more, they will get a receipt. Number of receipt pages. So especially on some of the some like the details and the all details, those can get lengthy, or even the weekly view, that can get lengthy. So if we try to have Excel shrink that down to one page, the font size is going to get pretty small. So here's where you can adjust that by setting that to 2 or 3 or 4 pages. One more thing, when it's time to do the receipts, we're going to basically come to your list of donors, and we're going to go down through them one at a time and print the receipts for them. So the question there on the parameter is, before you print, do you want them sorted by name, by number, or do you want to do no sorting so that they just simply follow whatever you have here in your donor list? So that would give you the option to sort these by name or by donor number before printing the receipts at the end of the year. Little helpful tip, if you're like for us, when it's time to print them out, we like to see them in order by last name. And so if you're doing that, as you're entering your donors, rather than doing what we have here, first name then last name, you would want to do something more like Tran, comma, Diana, or maybe Diana and Jeff. So you have, if you have that situation where it's a spouse, then you might want to do it this way, so that when you and then sort it by name before you print, so then they come out in order based on the last name. So just a tip and trick there, related to how you enter the names of your donors and why it matters, because you have control here with this parameter to sort it by name before you print them. Okay, next thing, when we are printing our receipts, our year-end receipts, for each donor we get to say, do we want to print the receipt to the printer? Yes. Or skip over it? No. Or we have an option to print the receipt to a PDF file. And then the last one, a little more optional, not many churches and organizations are using it, but an option to email it to the recipient. So directly emailing it from within the software. If you are using the PDF option, like we set up here for M.E. Shaw, then where is that PDF file going to be created? And so just as we talked about in this, where we save a weekly copy of our donation detail, we have the same kind of a situation here. If you leave this blank, then it's going to create the PDF file in the same place where you have your master Excel file. And if you don't want it to go there, if you want to specify a different folder, then that's where you would specify the folder name, similar to what we discussed up here. Like the C drive on a PC, or the local drive on a Mac, and make sure you have all the right slashes on the PC, backslashes on a PC, forward slashes on a Mac, have all that defined correctly, so that that is a properly identified folder name. Next thing, on the receipts, you have room for some headers, so you can put words in here for your receipts. Let's go back here real quick. So by default, you will have one portion of the receipt header is already defined to have annual giving receipt for, and then the year that you've set up here, the calendar year or the fiscal year. Then the church name, the church address. So those are going to already be in there. In addition to that, you have room where you can define extra words to put on your receipt, and we give you up to 3 rows to do that. Really important for the folks in in Canada because they need to include a website as part of their receipt, pointing back to the Canadian authority for charities and donations there. But you can have up to 3 different rows that you can add, and that's what we do in these receipt header lines here. You can put in your additional words. Then at the bottom, the footer, we have up to 5 rows of words that you can put on the receipt footer. So we have some examples by default in here, and again, that's here at the bottom, the footer. So 3 rows that are displayed, a couple blank rows where you can fill in additional words there if you want to. Okay, next thing we come to is related to emailing the receipts. Again, I know a lot of you are not using it. It's one of those optional things, but if you ever want to look at emailing receipts to your donors, then you would want to set up the subject line for the email message you're going to create when you send it out to them, as well as setting up then the body rows, meaning inside of the email message would be these words that you can specify, and then we will attach a PDF copy of their receipt. So receipt subject, the words inside of it, the body of the email message, receipt will be attached, and then it'll pick off the email address then from your donor list. Now, one of the important things about using the email to send out your receipts is you need to make sure that's set up correctly, and you need to test it to validate that My Excel program can, through your email system, and that would be Apple Mail on a Mac and Microsoft Outlook, not the web version of Outlook, but not the Outlook app, but the desktop version of Microsoft Outlook. That's what we're using then to send the email messages, and you do need to test that, and we have a menu item up here to test it. But the question when you're sending a test email message, where's it going? Who's going to receive it? So here's where you can put in an email address, and so you want to put in your email address, and that's what would be used when you do the test. So validating that when you click the button to test it, go to your email system and make sure that it was correctly sent over to you. All right, that's enough about receipts. Let's go on to the reports. And so when we're talking about reports, we're talking about this kind of a thing down here where we, by default, we're going to show the amounts that have come in through our donations, and we're going to summarize them for each month and give us a total at the bottom. So it's by month and by category, including the specials. And then, of course, in kind if you're doing in-kind donations as well. So the parameters related to that are, first of all, do you want to display your report on a calendar or a fiscal year? So you need to answer that question. The next question is, do you want your reports displayed monthly or weekly? So you saw the monthly one. Let's just go ahead and switch over there real quick. If you do the weekly report, then you're getting this kind of a thing. So it's the week ending, and then the amounts that came in throughout, that are totaled up for this particular week. Right. So I know some churches, because they're receiving donations each week, they wanted to be able to see it, by week, and then see the weekly total. It was kind of a way for them to kind of confirm that things matched. Also, what went into their bank deposit, where they can see, looking at the records from the bank, that the total donations match what they are seeing on the bank records by week. So that's the weekly one. Okay, same thing. Do you want to print it in black and white? If you have a color logo and you want to print it in color, then you would set that to no, and it would do color. Orientation, portrait or landscape. Again, that depends on how many donation categories you have, how wide it gets. You might need to switch that to portrait. How many copies do you want? So if you hand this out to each month to your 5 different church leaders or organization leaders, then you might want to go ahead and set that to 5 here rather than putting it on the copy machine. Your choice. Question about how many report pages. Just like we said on the other times when it comes to printing, if you have this set to 1, then we're going to shrink the font size to force it onto 1 page, especially the view of the weekly display. You know, that would shrink it way down to the point that it's probably unreadable. So you would want to set that to 2. If you're doing it landscape, you might need to set it to 3 to get everything to fit. But that's what that is for. We're going to force it onto how many pages. All right, last couple more things. We do on the footer of the report. Let me just set it back to the monthly report, and we'll take a look at that. So down on the footer, we have this this row here. This is the footer here, and you can adjust the text here on this particular parameter. So this is the text that we put on the report footer. Okay, related to reports is actually this 5-year comparison report. So again, we're going to end up with multiple years of data as we move through time using this software, and so we have this 5-year comparison. So it always looks back from the current year and then up to 4 years backwards in time. So we can actually ideally see how we are progressing as we move through time. But it's a 5-year comparison. So the parameters related to that are: do you want to do that the orientation of that report to be landscape or portrait, your choice? And do you want, how many copies do you want? And also the number of pages in case you need to be rather than shrinking it to 1, maybe you wanted to set that to 2 so it doesn't shrink the font very much. There is no question on this one about the color, because that particular report has a has a color bar chart, and so this one will attempt to print it in color. So that's why there's no question here. Okay, now we go down to one more, the donor list. So we do have the option here to print our donor list, and as your list of donors grows, you may find that when you print it and Excel is trying to shrink it down to 1 page, that the font is getting too small and it's too hard to read. So there's where, just like we talked about in the other ones, you can adjust it and say no, force it to fit on 2 pages, which will allow the font size to be larger. Yes, so those are the options related to printing the donor list. All right, I think we're making some good progress. Let's go ahead and finish this off and talk about the parameters related to the expenses and balances. Okay, so one of the questions is, do we want it to when we do the expense report, which is actually expenses, income versus expense, do we want that based on a calendar year or a fiscal year? Secondarily is, do you want that report to to total by week or by month. And let's take a look at the expense report that we're talking about. Okay, that's the EXP report, expense report. And so church name, the year, the balance of our different accounts, and then this is what Excel calls a pivot table, is what we're using then to do the report. So it's the income on top with your defined categories and subcategories, and the income is displayed as positive numbers. And then we come to the expenses. All of the expenses are done, since they're payments, not deposits, payments, they are done as negative numbers. And then we have your various categories and subcategories. And then we'll have, if you do the monthly one, then we'll have the sum of all of the income and expense for January, then for February, for March, April, May, and as you move through time, then you'll just continue to get additional columns here. So then we'll get June, then July, etc. As you add additional categories and subcategories, then the number of rows in the report will grow. So that's the report that we are referring to. So probably by the time you get to the end of the year, you'll need to make it landscape, printed in black and white, yes, just like we talked about before. Number of copies as well as the number of pages. Again, early on in the year, shrinking it to one page will be fine, but later on you'll probably need to make it landscape and might very well need to force it on 2 pages rather than one single page so that you can still read it. All right, a couple other questions. Hide the transfer section. Okay, so down at the bottom we have the transfer. So basically, in this case, so in this case we took money out of the checking account to move to PayPal. So the net of this is 0, but if you don't hide that, you can see then your transfers between the different accounts. So typically, done right, the total for transfers will be $0 because you're just moving money from one account to another. So it's $225 out, $225 in. So the net will be 0. But if you want to see that, then you would set that parameter to no, and it will make it visible. So it's the idea, do you want to hide that section of the report, yes or no? Okay, we also have another report called the balances report. That's where you can enter beginning balances for each of your different accounts. So this would be your checking account, savings account, credit card, could be the PayPal, Venmo, those kinds of accounts. So you can set the opening balance for the year, and then as you are entering basically your deposits and your expenses, then we will mathematically then adjust from the opening balance, add all the deposits, subtract all the payments, and then give you a current balance. So this is the report we're talking about when we talk about the balance report. So the question is, do you want to do that landscape or portrait? How many copies do you want, and how many pages do you want Excel to force that onto? Just like we talked about before, that same kind of an idea. The next question is, In the when you're entering your expenses, do you want to use subcategories in addition to your categories? So let's make sure we're kind of on board there. So when you're doing your not only your donations, but especially on your expenses, you can have a category as well as a subcategory. So an example here, this is a really good one here. For our pastor's salary and our secretary's salary, um, we want them to be to have a category of employees. So this would be at a higher level. We'll summarize both salaries together, and so we can see the total of both of them. But the subcategory is really the detail level where we say, hey, this salary is for the secretary, this salary is for the pastor. Talk about it, the similar thing, but let's talk about it regarding utilities, right? So here we are identifying that the category is utilities, so I can see what my utility cost is at a higher level in total. But at the detail level, we have the subcategory of this is how much we paid for electricity, for gas, rent, telephone, water. So that's the idea of doing the categories and subcategories. All right, next thing. When we are doing our donations on the entry tab and we're done and we click the buttons to say entry is complete, do you want the software to copy those donations over automatically and put them into the expense part? And that would look like this part right up here. So so here we had a donation to the general fund, and this was the amount that was deposited for that. On 4.3 we had these donations to the general fund, this donation to the mission fund, but these things are being written over automatically from the donation side. Okay, and so if you do want those donations written automatically, the next thing you have to fill in is the name that you're going to use on the category level. I'm sorry, no it isn't. The deposit identifier. Sorry about that. Sorry, the deposit identifier. And that's just simply this word here. Right, for all of the donations, what do we want to put here in this column? Okay, so by default it's set to the word deposit. The other thing then, what category do you want to use when you're copying it over? Sorry, this is the broad category, and underneath of that the subcategory will be your donation categories. So general, missions, charity, and your specials, that will be the subcategory, but this one is defining what word do we put in here for the category of our various donations. So that's what we'll lump them all together under the category donations. At the lower level, the subcategory will see the general, the missions, the charity, those things. All right. One more thing is, and when we're automatically moving these donations over, which account is going to receive these donations? By default, it should be set to the generic checking account. But if you have different options in here, then you get the option to choose from your various accounts, so that you can adjust this. If all of your deposits come in and go into a savings account, then you can adjust that. Okay, next thing, on the expenses, as you're entering those, do you want to see the comments column? And this is one where you can put in kind of generic comments here about your different donations. They could be generic comments, or they could be something that you want to put in there to help you. Maybe one example of using this would be later we're going to create a report, a custom report, where um, we want to track our expenses compared to perhaps a budget, and we might need some additional information here that we can use in our Excel cell formula to help kind of categorize these things correctly as they compare to our budget items. So just a way to use that, but it's a field that you can use for a variety of different things, including just simple generic comments. But do you want to use that on your report, on your expense entry? Yes or no? All right, and then two other things. Let's make sure they are visible. And that is the columns related to is this item missing on my report? Yes or no? So sorry, on the statement. So when we're doing our entry here, and then later on we want to compare this to our balances. The concept here is that let's take the checking account as an example. We started with this opening balance, and then we saw these deposits and these payments, and so this is now our new balance, our current balance, based on where we began in 2025, adding our deposits, subtracting off our payments. That's our balance mathematically. However, we know that when we get this statement from the bank, that a lot of times those most recent items aren't on the bank statement, even though they're in our entry, our expense entry. And so you get the option to tell the software which things are not on the bank statement. So let's go ahead as an example. We'll say that these things here in just go ahead and do all of them, right? We'll start here and we'll say these ones are missing on my bank statement. And then we'll see what that does over on the report. Okay, now when we look at the balances report, we'll see that this is our current balance based on what's in the expenses entry tab. However, $469.75 was marked as missing, meaning not included on the checking account statement from the bank. And so our bank balance statement is 13,000, not the 12,000. And so that's what that is used for. And so the parameter says whether or not you want that column to be visible and therefore used for that. The other one is kind of a similar thing in that it's the last column here on the expenses tab, and this was provided so that you have the option to say whether or not for these particular items, let's say the expense, we need an expense. Oh, I don't have any good examples here. Okay, that doesn't help. So for any given expense, oh no, this would be a good one. Okay, sorry. This is a good one. So a credit card was used to buy some charitable items at the local Food Lion of $95. So probably some groceries that were given, in a charitable respect, to someone who needed groceries. The question is, and was a receipt given for that item? So you can mark on there which things for which you have received a receipt to go along with those particular expenses. So just an optional thing, but there were, I know, some churches that wanted to be able to indicate which things, for which things they received a receipt, and so where they felt they needed to go back and chase somebody down and get the receipt, they could at least see whether or not it's been provided. So that's what that one is for. Last thing, turn off the prompt for the donation date. What does that mean? So when you open the donation software, the very first thing it's going to do is that it's going to prompt you for the donation date. I'll just run that real quick, and you can see that. Okay, so when you first open it, the first thing it does is it always prompts for the donation date. Okay, and if you're focusing on doing the expenses, then you just say cancel and go over and enter your expenses. So it's pretty simple to skip over it. However, I know there are some organizations that have chosen to use it not for the donations and expenses, but they are actually using it for the expense tracking only. Well, I mean, they're putting their receipts or income in here, but they're doing it manually, not through the donation part of it. And so for them who are using it only on the expense tracking type, so that's this tab and the balances and the expense report. It's crazy for them to get that prompt every time they open it. So you have the option to turn that off so that it will not prompt when you open the software. It'll just skip over it, so you can just get going on the expenses part. Okay, we're almost done. Next thing is to set up the categories that you're using for your donations. So in this sample, we have our general category, our missions, and our charity. Some people use the word benevolence, but if you can have additional categories all the way up to 20 different categories. So let's say you're one of the organizations, or how about one of the churches that you do these things on a regular basis, and then you also routinely collect. So basically every week you're expecting to get things given to help your youth program. So you want to go ahead and rather than just simply using that as a special offering, if you only do it once or twice a year, special offering's fine. But if you do it all the time, then you'd want to set that up as an additional category. All right, so you put the name of your category here, and then here you define how many categories you are using. So in this case, we now are using 4 different categories. So we set that to 4, and again, it's one of those pink ones. So donation software, adjust the tabs. And when we come back here to our entry screen, now we have our general missions charity, and here's the additional youth category that we added. So that's what the donation categories are about, and they are very important that you get this set up initially. I'll go ahead and set that back to 3, and let's go on from there. We're almost done. So the next part of it has to do with the accounts that you're using. So by default, the checking account will be in there, and you're welcome to change the name of it if you want to. But in addition to your checking account, what else? What other accounts do you have? So you might have a credit card, you might be using PayPal or Venmo, you might have a savings account. So the names of your accounts you'd put in here, as well as telling the software how many of those you're using. So that will come to play on the balances report, where you will see listed the number of accounts here that you are using, and it will then also aid you in tracking the opening balance, the deposits, the payments, the current balance of those different accounts. It also plays into when you're doing your entry, we have a little drop down here where you can select the names of the different accounts. So this is how we keep track of the payments and deposits for the various accounts, because you can identify that right here and set that when you're doing your entry. And the things that are available on the drop-down list are based on the list that you have here and the number of accounts that you've listed here. Final thing is the currency, and this all goes back to this part here when we're putting in our donation details. Okay, so we're doing our details, and we're putting in the cash amount. We get to the end of recording our donation, and we have effectively a pile of cash and coins sitting in front of us. And from there, we want to make sure that everything is in balance. So so we count how many nickels, how many dimes, how many quarters we have, how many $1 bills, $5 bills, and we enter that here, and then Excel does the math and tells us how much that is, totals it all together, and compares it to what we entered up above. And so this idea of putting in the quantities of these different things, and whether or not your country, or that is your currency, has pennies or nickels or dimes or quarters, or maybe you have different names for these. Maybe you don't have a $1 bill. Maybe your currency, you only have fives, or like in Canada we have loonies and toonies. Okay, so the names of the coins and paper bills, as well as the valuation, so we can do the correct math here based on the quantity. All of that is done, is defined here in the currency part. So this is where you put the names of your coins, the names of your paper bills, and the valuation, so that when you say you have 4 quarters, Excel can do the math. 4 times 25, oh, that's $1 worth of quarters. So your names, your values, and here you tell it how many of the different things you're using. Okay, and just to so you can kind of see it, some good examples here. We have it set up. This is what it would look like then for Canada, where you don't have any pennies, but you do have nickels, dimes, quarters, loonies, and toonies. Or in Brazil, your centavos, reals, right? And then the valuation. Here we have Mexico, centavos and pesos, the Dominican Republic. So same idea here. So this is where you define the coins in the paper, the names, and the values, so we can correctly do that balancing of all of your cash over on the entry tab. And that is everything related to the parameters. All right, I will try to continue making additional videos to show you different aspects of the software. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you in the next video.